depending on the situation.
From trailers like this, pilots of the Predator and its larger cousin, the Reaper, have killed thousands of individuals since 2001. In this clip from Iraq, a Predator pilot sees two insurgents firing mortars towards a coalition airbase. He tracks them and finally shoots.
Flash.
The pilot's role is to support troops on the ground and go after threats while trying to minimize civilian casualties. With such high stakes, pilots like Chad need ongoing training. As Chad pilots the Reaper, his sensor operator, Jay, controls the cameras and lasers.
Rally from Bolts 3-4, it looks like the one individual wearing black is now getting on the motorcycle and departing the group.
Depending on the situation, the decision to kill comes from an intelligence officer who could be anywhere, a battle commander on the ground, or sometimes the pilot. In October 2001, an armed Predator changed warfare forever.
I was the commander of the air operations against Afghanistan, where we actually used for the first time a weapon off the MQ-1 Predator. The advantages were enormous, order of magnitude beyond where remotely piloted vehicles had been just 10 years prior in Desert Storm.
Since this initial strike, drones have proven so effective that the Air Force is now training more remote pilots than manned fighter and bomber pilots combined. At Holloman Air Force Base in New Mexico, instructor Major Jason teaches this new generation of pilots.
03, loud clear.
The stakes are high when operational, so they begin on video simulators. He invents practice scenarios programmed using Xbox video game controllers.
Adam 09, Viking 01, you're clear on. Stuff that we can't do in the real plane, I can do anything here. Because the world's whatever I want it to be.
3, 2, 1, right.
It's a controlled environment and we want them to learn here, so that way when they do go operational, you know, they've already made all those mistakes.
Pilot, it doesn't look like I ever turned the laser on, so I don't know where the missile went.
How did that happen? If that would have happened in the real world, that'd be a really, really bad day.
Unlike fighter pilots who train for a minimum of 2 years, remote pilots learn to fly their increasingly automated drones in less than one.
They come here, they never went to pilot training like I did. They're here for a few months and then they have to go operational, so it happens real fast.
Adam 09, rifle time of flight, 15 seconds.
And when pilots go operational, despite being half a world away from the action, it all feels very real.
Mike 01, copy splash.
It's not like a video game at all. There's no reset button, there's no, there's no turning it off.
In real strikes, like this one in Iraq, technology actually allows drone pilots to see more than manned pilots ever have.
Because we have such a long loiter time, there's potential to have eyes on the target that we are going to blow up for hours ahead of time. Then we employ on it, strike the target, and then stick around for another few hours to watch what happens afterwards. You have to stay there and then stay plugged in and stay focused on the destruction that you just caused from your aircraft.
In 2012 alone, the U.S. carried out hundreds of drone strikes across 4 countries. Afghanistan is the only publicly authorized war, while strikes in Pakistan, Somalia, and Yemen are covert CIA operations performed without putting American lives on the line.
The technology has enabled us to set aside some of the risk factors of sending a pilot in harm's way. So it's meant that we've conducted a lot more strikes that would have been more problematic if we were using manned systems.
The U.S. claims drones have decimated Al-Qaeda's top leadership while causing limited civilian casualties. But the facts are hard to come by.
We know fairly well how many strikes are occurring. What we don't know is the details, who the targets were, whether they were actually eliminated or whether some other people were killed, because verification is very difficult.
There are no fully reliable counts of civilian deaths, but some critics claim that as many as 30% of those killed in the broader drone wars are civilians, and that the strikes turn people against the U.S. and violate international law. After more than 10 years of attacks, the U.S. officially acknowledged its use of drones to target Al-Qaeda members in April 2012, when presidential advisor John Brennan gave a speech.
The United States government conducts targeted strikes against specific Al-Qaeda terrorists, sometimes using remotely piloted aircraft, often referred to publicly as drones.
He was met with a strong reaction.
Hundreds of innocent people we are killing with our drone strikes in Pakistan and in Yemen and Somalia. They deserve an apology from you, Mr. Brennan. I speak out on behalf of the Constitution, on behalf of the rule of law. I love the rule of law. I love my country. You are making us less safe by killing so many innocent people around the world. Shame on you.
Thank you. What is happening with the use of this technology? Because it is being done in the name of the United States.
Drone technology enables America to strike virtually anyone, anywhere with ease, regardless of national boundaries.
We've seen the deep controversy that surrounds these strikes in places like Pakistan or Yemen or Somalia, and a whole new series of questions for international law.
The fact that you're not flying a human being across a national boundary still makes it an invasion of a country.
We've entered an era where we are conducting an array of operations using unmanned systems that in a previous generation we would have called war, and we would have treated like war. When you're conducting more than 300 airstrikes into a country, you're conducting the equivalent of at least an air war campaign, but we don't call it that now.
Drones can strike with pinpoint precision, but their visual sensors are limited in ways that can lead pilots to make mistakes.
As they stand now, the limitations they have with the Predator is not being able for the pilot to look around and see what's going on.
When the operator zooms in to see detail, it's like looking through a soda straw, and the pilot loses the broader picture.
These individual little small sensor balls could generally see only a very small area on the Earth, even if you're up at 20,000 feet.
I can't look out and see that maybe there's something else going on outside and around me.
So the crew's grasp of the situation can be limited. And when they zoom in, they sometimes lose sight of key details on the ground. This secret 2010 transcript, obtained by journalists through the Freedom of Information Act, reveals what can go wrong. While supporting forces on the ground, a Predator team mistook a convoy of Afghan civilians, including women and children, for militants. The pilot asks, "Is that a rifle?" The answer is, "Can't really tell." After hours of monitoring, the ground commander calls in a strike. And 23 civilians die, in part because of limitations of the sensors. Unmanned aircraft remain vulnerable in other ways. The Air Force's large drones still crash more often than manned planes. The $100 million Global Hawk is nearly 3 times more likely to crash than the U-2 it was designed to replace. Even if there's no pilot to lose, when a drone goes down, it can still be a problem.
It doesn't take a thermonuclear brain surgeon to figure out that if you are operating a highly advanced, technologically capable system, that you prefer not for it to fall into adversary hands.
In 2011, an American spy drone, the RQ-170 Sentinel, was lost over Iran.
There was a problem with the aircraft, and it landed in an area it shouldn't have landed in, and that's about all I'm going to say.
The Iranians claim they hacked into the drone's control system and took over the craft. And in theory, it is possible to take over any computerized system.
UAVs sometimes aren't that smart. Their self-diagnosis isn't all that smart. And by the time they have a problem, it's too late. You lose the link, lose power, and you're gone.
Control can be lost for a number of reasons. When Reaper pilot Chad simply banks too sharply, he loses the satellite link.
Uh-oh.
The picture freezes, and he's momentarily flying blind.
That was me turning.
He quickly levels the craft and restores the link.
I was turning aggressively and it had trouble keeping up the satellite link.
It's a game changer, but it's not just an American revolution. There are more than 55 other countries right now that are building, buying, or using military robotics, particularly in the air.
But in the drone's arms race, the U.S. is constantly developing new technologies, like a small flying camera with a twist called Switchblade.
The Switchblade will launch out of this tube, and the wings, the tail, the propeller will all spring open. That's why it's called Switchblade. And so when the operator finds the target by looking into the viewing screen, he'll then send a command to the Switchblade that'll enable the Switchblade to basically hone in on that target and detonate its explosive charge upon contact. It's a tool that our customers are very excited about, and it's a tool we think will protect our forces and help save innocent lives.
Switchblade's already been deployed. As human ambition drives innovation forward, the only thing that's certain is that the Predator and other drones of today are nothing compared with what's to come.
Historically, you look at when the Wright brothers first flew in 1903. 100 years later, we were actively flying remotely piloted aircraft. So we're kind of on the ground floor now. There's nowhere to go but up.
Just summarize a little bit. We learned that military drones come in a variety of sizes, from the handheld to the huge $100 million global hawk.
But for the rest of the presentation, we're going to focus on the Predator. So let's continue with that.
Predators can stay aloft for about 24 hours.
Their cameras can see for up to 6 miles.
We learned that a weapon is employed. It's most likely, if it is, it's mostly the Hellfire missile, which costs $68,000.
We learned that both the President and a vast majority of Americans approve the use of drones mostly as a way to keep American boots off the ground. We learned the Department of Defense and covertly the Central Intelligence Agency, the CIA, operate fleets of drones around the world.
In Yemen, Somalia, Pakistan, Afghanistan, Iraq.
A drone crew consists of 2 individuals, a pilot and a sensor operator who fly the craft from thousands of miles away from the strike. So maybe in New Mexico, maybe in
Coleman Field, Omaha, wherever. Those are just the 2 people that are actually in charge of the actual plane, or the unmanned, the drone, I shouldn't call it a plane. But there's about 300 people that are working on it. They're watching the footage. They're, looking at the film from it. So it's not just 2 people. It really is resource intensive with people that are involved.
And did you notice when the missile hit the target and something was destroyed, the word used was
He tracks them and finally shoots.
Splash. Splash. It appeared a couple times in this.
And also, I was taking note of the words that they use that are not military words. I mean, it's military words for them, but it makes everything seem so pure. You know, the place where all the action is happening, they call the theater. You know, they're going to engage the person. You know, they're killing them. You know, you're not engaging them. We're engaging in a conversation here.
So, what do we know about drones? There are legalities in drone use.
Or illegalities.
Oh. It says legalities.
I know.
What are legalities?
Yeah. Oh, it does.
It does say legalities.
Well,
There are some legal constraints.
So we saw Medea Benjamin in that short video clip.
She was the one who was being hauled out by security because she interrupted Brennan.
Yeah.
And she has since this film interrupted President Obama also, and he told security not to take her out because it was her right to speak up, and he said we should listen to this woman, but he hasn't so far.
Yeah, evidently not. And Malalaya, the young Pakistani girl who was shot, she was also in an audience of him too. Her name's Malala. Okay. But the reason I bring that up is because Leah Bolger, and by the way, Medea Benjamin was in the Twin Cities in August to give a talk for people. We sponsored an event. But Leah Bolger was also at an event that we had in March. But the two of them were on the same delegation over to Pakistan where they talked with victims, family members of victims of drone strikes.
And Leah's the one who had the slide that was so striking to me with the woman's red headscarf in the tree.
One of the things that's that I think is remarkable, that part of their visit, is that she had an audience with, or a meeting with, the Ambassador Hoagland, from a United States ambassador stationed in Pakistan, and they asked him questions about the drone strikes, and his answer was there have been no civilian casualties with the drone strikes. I mean, he's paid by our government to know what's going on, and that was his reaction to a United States citizen going over there. So she did a little talk on drones for us.
And she has 5 reasons that she believes drone strikes are illegal. And one is that a drone attack violates the sovereignty of a country. And we named all the many countries where there's no technically war, there's no war going on, and still we're killing people within the boundaries of those countries. There's no transparency or accountability, especially in the CIA program, which is all classified. And that is the program that operates the drones outside of the U.S. military, which is in charge of the drone program at this point only in Afghanistan.
Another thing that kind of piggybacks onto this certain issue is just in the newspaper this last week, Code Pink brought to light that there is a fund where we can pay victims of strikes, family members, restitution, yeah, that's the word. They have not dispersed any of those funds yet. Why? Because then they would have to admit that they actually killed people that were militants. And so it's just a big, and that's, more will come out soon, I'm sure. This was just brought to light in the last few days, and I think when we get to the part, what can you do part, we're going to say what you can do about that.
And I did talk earlier about the difficulty of making positive IDs of, especially of civilians who are killed in drone attacks. That there's not evidence, there isn't a paper trail of a person having lived in the remote tribal areas of Pakistan or Afghanistan. So how can we say they were killed? Because we can't prove they were living.
Well, and we also, when you looked at the video, you saw what the person viewing can see. And I probably could distinguish between a grown-up and a child. You know, you could tell that much, but you can't tell who it is. You can't tell what they're doing. So I don't see, to me, that's not evidence to strike. It's not a positive ID either. You know, and plus, like they said, the soda straw visual, you know, it's like tunnel vision. You know, they don't know if behind that building it was someone else that came out, not the person you were tracking. They did say they track them for hours and hours and days, and then we'll talk about later about that terrorizing kind of what happens with those drones.
So the individual who actually is the target of the drone strike has no due process. In our U.S. system of law, if you are suspected and accused of a crime, there's a court where you are entitled to a defense. So that the people who are targeted and are killed by a drone strike don't have a chance to say, wait a minute, this is my defense, and nor can they surrender and say, okay, take me in, you know, call me a prisoner of war, whatever you want. But there's not that opportunity.
And when we first came in, Bob mentioned about the grandmother, that there's a story in the news about Amnesty
International.
I can't say that word.
Yeah.
Amnesty International having a report, and their lead-in story to get you to read the rest of the story is about a grandmother who was killed, actually in front of her grandchildren. And her one grandson, in reacting to her being, exploded, he was also attacked. A strike was, and that's called double tapping. And that doesn't happen all the time, but there is where they will strike people that come to help or rescue or attend to the people who were just killed. This came to light about 2 years ago when Private Manning, who you may have heard of, who's been called a whistleblower or a truth teller, he released a bunch of information to WikiLeaks. And probably the most famous one was the video of the pilots and the transcript of them going back and forth whether or not they're going to, you know, do this strike. And then later on, they're watching everybody come to help, and they're deciding whether or not they're going to strike again, and they do. And you can watch this. I think it was probably the most watched video. I think it was the summer of 2011, wasn't it? The year before last. So there is proof of this happening. Did you want to add anything else to the legalities?
No, legalities, but I'm just thinking again about the language used. Double tap sounds so benign.
Yeah, yeah. And then you have the whole issue of what the rules of war are, and we don't really get into it in this talk. No. We touched upon it. That person doesn't have a chance to, prove themselves not guilty. But there's also, killing civilians. In the rules of war, you can kill soldiers, but this is not on the. You brought it up. It's not in the arena of actual war. So. One of the things that they talk about as a pro of using the drones is that it helps keep our soldiers safe or out of harm's way, because the pilot and the people doing this are thousands of miles away. But it does affect soldiers at home. And we have a story of a young man from Missoula, Montana. His name is Brandon Bryant. He's a 6-year Air Force veteran. And I'm going to share his story with you now. Brander was a sensor operator, the equivalent of a pilot, of a co-pilot. He would be the one sitting in the right-hand seat above, and his job was to lock in on the target and set the laser that guided the missile for its target. The pilot would actually fire the weapon. But it was an incident when the Predator drone was circling above a flat roof shed made of mud in Afghanistan, more than 6,250 miles away. That was the turning point for him. The hut had a shed used to hold goats, and when he received the order to fire, he pressed a button with his left hand and marked the roof with a laser. The pilot sitting next to him pressed the trigger on a joystick, causing the drone to launch the Hellfire missile. There were 16 seconds left until impact. These moments were like in slow motion, he said. As the countdown reached 7 seconds, there was no sign of anyone on the ground. Brandon could still have diverted the missile at that point. But when it was down to 3 seconds, a child suddenly walked around the corner. The next thing he saw was a flash on the screen, the explosion, the building collapsed, and the child disappeared. Did we just kill a kid? He asked the pilot next to him. Yeah, I guess that was a kid, the man replied. On that little sheet of paper we gave you, there were 3 things listed for, one said illegal, one said expensive, and the last one said terrorize. And here's the sound of a drone. The story of the grandmother that Amnesty International talks about in their article is that, you know, you think, well, why was she out there? You know, if she heard the drone going, the sound of the drone. Well, she said they heard it all the time. How did they know that this time it would be the time that they were killed? The next few slides are pictures and quotes from people that were taken from a study done by Stanford University and the Investigative Journalism Project. Put out a pretty hefty report called Living Under Drones, and you could access this from our blog, Ground All Drones. But they're quotes from family members who have been killed. They did extensive research just in Pakistan and just in the last couple of years. And so I'll just let the pictures and the quotes speak for themselves. I don't know if it's part of the missile. About 10 days ago, there was an attack, and the group that conducted the attack said that they were going to keep doing that until the Americans stopped using drone strikes. It was kind of their way of retaliating, only it wasn't, they were not retaliating to us. Any questions?
How often do these drone attacks occur?
How often?
Daily or weekly?
You know, if they aren't attacking, they're still hovering around and, you know, maintaining a presence. I noticed in April when they had the hearings to, what do you call it, when John Brennan was supposed to be approved, confirmation hearings. Yes. And I think there was a lot of people, you know, calling their senators about this, and it was in the news an awful lot. They actually were reduced for a while. We didn't hear of any attacks for quite a while. But like the first week in October, there were like 3 of them in 1 week where there were deaths. In Pakistan. It's on the border between Afghanistan and Pakistan. There's a tribal area, and you know more about that.
Yeah, a Pakistani man spoke to a group of us in March, and he was a Humphrey Fellow at the University of Minnesota from Pakistan, and was a police officer in Pakistan, and he talked about that tribal area that has it's, you know, hundreds, centuries old. The Pashtun people and the various tribes along the border of newly established border between Afghanistan and Pakistan, which was established after World War I. Some of those borders. So he talked about the culture and some of the rules of the culture. One is that you grant hospitality, and that was very difficult for the Pakistani police because they had, you know, a criminal, and anywhere in Pakistan, if that criminal made his way to this tribal area, the families there, the people are obligated because of their cultural values to take in a traveler or anyone who asks for hospitality. And it's kind of a life or death thing in the mountainous, really rough region, and it's an ancient custom. So they have rules of hospitality that then protect, and the people who are terrorists, can take advantage of that. So then if the United States identifies someone who is truly dangerous, the people who have granted hospitality are also victimized by that attack. And another thing he talked about was that it's a culture of vengeance, so that if my family member is killed by one of your CIA drones, my obligation is to avenge that wrongful death. And not just my family and my brothers and my nephews, but into the next generation and the next and the next. So this is really troubling. It's not going to, for the United States, it's not going to be one day over. We won't be able to say in 2 years, okay, we're not going to do these attacks any longer, because there will be people who will be striking back at us, certainly, in various ways. What was
Well, he asked how often. You know, another...
we don't know, because the CIA is in charge of a lot of these, what I consider to be assassinations. And the CIA doesn't tell the American people, or the entire Congress even, how often the drone strikes are happening. And that's part of the reason for the huge discrepancy in the number of deaths reported, civilian deaths reported by the United States and reported by the official in Pakistan. Huge discrepancy, and part of it that I talked about when we opened, that if you aren't considered by the United States government to be a civilian, if you're male and 14 years and older, then you're considered to be a militant, not a civilian. And women and men sometimes don't have documentation of their birth or life, and so then their deaths can't be documented.
Yeah, and Obama said that he was going to be more transparent.
Yeah.
And he sounded like he was, upset with this. But there's been, I think, 3 times as many drone strikes under his administration than when Bush was president. Another thing that you hear in the news, or that the administration will brag about, is that they're killing these militants, high operative, I think was the words that they used in the video, or that you'll see in newspaper accounts. But actually only 2% of the people killed are actually high operative militants. So that means 98% of the people didn't need to be killed. I mean, I'm not for war, and I'm not for killing to solve problems, but I think that that's not a very good percentage that's allowable. And also the reason for the kills, for the he has a kill list. In order to actually kill someone in war, like that, there has to be like is it imminent threat?
Imminent
Threat, okay. So following a man going about his daily business in his country is not an imminent threat to the United States, or even to the troops that may be nearby on the ground. I mean, we saw what video, I'm sure in this Lockheed Martin video, they would have shown us a clip where our people were in danger, wouldn't they? I mean, it's an advertisement for the use of drones. And I didn't see anybody's life in danger in the little clip that they showed us. So that's my reasoning for now.
Well, and I don't want to appear to be naive. I think that there are dangerous people who are trying to get us, to attack American soldiers or others. But in our system of justice in the United States, we generally don't execute people for something they're planning to do. We need to, unfortunately, somebody has to do something horrible before we arrest and try and convict, and in some states execute individuals. But we're executing people internationally because we suspect, or maybe we're even pretty sure, that they would do harm. It's very arbitrary, and
that's
Right.
probably a better way.
It's
She
illegal.
had a question